All right, so here we get to dive into, okay, so we talked about what is business analysis, who does it, a little bit about just a little bit is an introduction about who the business analyst is in terms of skills. Big questions of what does the BA do and what skills are needed, just to dive into this completely now. So this is a little bit of a busy slide here. So focus more on a little tiny stick figure diagram or pseudo stick figure diagram. Now the whole point of this slide is what is the business analyst doing? The person's focusing on translating business needs into requirements that are going to be implemented by development. The development people being represented by the technology. So the liaison between here's one group of people, here's the other group of people. They usually don't understand each other very well. The business analyst has to understand both of them. Okay. So this is a nice little pseudo math way of thinking about requirements. Right, so in the context of eliciting requirements, stakeholders are always going to express, here's what I would really like. Now the business analyst has to be able to say, does that matter or not? And there's lots of things we'd like, but does it really help the business, or is it just something you like that we spend time and money on it? It's really not going to help the business. That distinction is important. So just from a pseudo math perspective, the actual requirements are the need minus the desire. So the idea here is you got to be able to, part of the analysis is you're taking in elicitation, is you're eliciting for requirements, then analyzing what you get. You got to be able to differentiate, okay, what's actually needed versus desired. So there's a quick little prioritization scheme on this. Let me just put that on the whiteboard here. Okay, from a prioritization perspective, that slide was showing requirements equals need minus desire. In other words, subtract the desired parts out. From prioritization perspective, the need would break down into, there's an acronym here I'm going to give you, called Moscow. Exactly. So this is the must-have, should-have, and this is in your notes, but it's quite a few pages forward. Could have, and I usually try to cover every piece of information twice. Once is like, I'll just be like a bird flying by and it'll be gone. And what was the color of the bird? I don't know. It was a bird that flew by. Could have and would have. All right, so the need from the business perspective is here's what we must have and here's what we should have. The idea of should have is that, yeah, we have to have it, but maybe it doesn't need to be complete. The functionality needs to be there, but it can be a little bit ugly in terms of the implementation. We can live with that, or it doesn't need to be fully complete in terms of all the features that could go with it. It could have and the would have, it's good to set that off on the side. So there's another general rule in this context from a methodology where we'll do a very brief, short survey of software methodologies here. But it's called the Dynamic Systems Development, DS method, DSDM, Dynamic Systems Development Method. The name will show up in the slides after a couple more days here. But this approach says that 80% of the value right here, so this is the value perspective, 80% of the value can be done in 20% of the project time. Whereas if you pay attention to this other stuff over here, this is time to implement. Right, so if you'll look at that from a business perspective, if I can get 80% of my value, 20% of the project time, I'm staying there. Okay, because it takes a lot. Usually, it takes a lot of time to deal with all these, all of these desire or could have type items in order to finish things off, because complexity grows, not exponentially, but it's more than linear in terms of complexity. So we want to be able to stay within requirements, meaning focus on the needs. And here's what this principle here I'm outlining for value and time to implement. This is what made dynamic systems development methodology gain traction and acceptance. And it's an interesting methodology because it's very heavily prototype based. So it's very flexible. It's considered to be an agile methodology, even though it existed probably way before agile. Okay, the value of a business analyst, as you go through this is a quick bullet list, but investigating a situation, what does that sound like? I mentioned it earlier. Investigating a situation, that would be like looking at the call tickets, the sport tickets. Yeah, this is root cause analysis, investigating a situation. So it can't include root cause analysis. It can be more than that, obviously. Analyzing strategy. Strategy is all about how do we get the work done? What's the best way to sequence the work? What features should go first or second? Modeling business processes. So what type of diagram do we use for that? What's one type of diagram that we use for that? It's actually very common.
Of the swim.
Yeah, swim lane. So we'll hear that often enough since you put it on the table already. All right, that's like we'll come back to that as a reference point, because that puts something tangible to the terms here. So modeling business processes, dominantly it's the swim lane. There's also another one called SIBOC that we'll look at. All right, stimulating thinking. This is the brainstorming. How do you interact with people to be able to get what they think on the table? And developing business cases we covered. Specifying information systems. So this is an odd one to show up here. Okay, what would a business analyst specify for information systems? Now, the first reaction is, that's a weird one.
I would think of it in reference to purchasing of hardware or software or something to that degree.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I did when I was the IT asset management.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so that there's specifying, so what types of requirements would you work from? That's the purchasing of, but it's based around some type of need that got expressed in some context.
Mine was pretty much user requirements.
Mm-hmm. User requirements in terms of functionality or user requirements in terms of capacity?
It was functionality, and it did have some capacity, but it was more functionalities, how they were able to get their work done.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, so that would make sense from the BA perspective. So you had a concrete item of requirements that were handed off. So you could say, okay, here's what I need to go by, or here's what I need to assess. And then from potential vendors, choose a.
And that's how I got from what are your requirements, and then let's draw the business case. That's why mine went the reverse.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because now it becomes tangible. It's like, all right, that's interesting because you're using the framework of the business case to assess what the options are. So you're, in their context, business cases functionally was maybe showing up twice.
Mhm.
I've seen this happen, basically for the change over to Workday, and what the business analysts pushed for was that if they switched to Workday, they wouldn't have to go, because we had a kind of like a elaborate change management system for enhancements to Oracle e-business. And so they were saying that I think they sold the functional users on the fact that if you switch to Workday, we don't have to deal with any of the DBAs or anyone from FIS that had these checks, you know, that we had to go through in order to get to production. And so I think that alone just sold everybody on Workday.
So meaning Workday was willing to customize?
It was like they didn't want to answer to the system that we had in place for the change management control. And so it was like, it was going to make your life easier. And so that was, everyone jumped on board.
Okay, interesting. It sounds like they eliminated the change management component.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. So just take it and smile, all right? You're a frog, do it in the corners nobody sees.
Yeah.
All right, so this BA is wearing many hats here. This is a really key aspect now. All right, so diplomat. Diplomat means, you know what, you're representative, you're representing a business. You know, if you think of a diplomat to another country, you're representing your business group, so it's like represent it well. Negotiator, what does a negotiator have to be able to see? It's like, here's what's valuable, and here's what's needed, but I know what can be traded off. And I know where I have the authority to agree to some type of trade-off or to, you know, refer to somebody else for the background to trade off something. Moderator, being able to handle working with a group of people and letting them talk while you're listening, while I'm listening, and be able to get useful information out of that experience. Facilitator, this is just a lot of coordination, right? You're going to see the word facilitator show up also in the sense of being a moderator. So I'm giving you my little spin on it, even though the facilitator is a lot broader, firmer definition. You know, the Agile class, I've done a lot of the slides for the Agile class. So here's the 10 or 15 points of the facilitator. It's like, wow, this actually formally exists. All right, skilled listener. Here's one I'd like to camp on just for a moment. I maybe used up too much whiteboard for that, but I'll use a portion of the board. So, skilled listener. There's an acronym that I'd like us to think about. It's one I actually got out of the book. It's an Agile book that we used to use. There's a better Agile book that we switched over to for preparing for the ACP exam. But the acronym here is LoRa. Yeah, I'm just going to erase this part so I have more room here. So if I do LoRa, this one is listening. And what it means is listening actively. Well, I'll just fill these in and we'll come back to them in just a second. This is understanding. And this is retaining. And this is action, taking action. In the business world, we're not, you know, when we talk with groups of people spending the company's money on our time, we're not just idly talking. It's like we're making decisions, getting input for decisions, whatever it might be. All right, so listening actively. Going back to this one, what does this look like? So what's the basic breakdown of listening? If you or I are listening to somebody, we're taking into account 3 different expressions in that communication. One expression is the words that we say. Another expression is the tone of voice. And the other is the body language. Okay. So listen actively, thinks about these things, and the words are only about 8%. The tone is about 12%, and the body language is about 80%. Those are the, and these percentages are going to vary from study to study, but this is a good ballpark that works across all of the studies. All right, so exchanging information through a text or email, words only, pretty inefficient. Unless you already know the person or you've already met, then it's very efficient. Okay. Tone of voice, if you're on the phone call with somebody, it's interesting what tone of voice does. It's like, so you really understand that? So you really understand that? One is affirming, yes, you do understand that. The other is the questioning, you sure you understand things? I don't think you do. So your tone of voice can totally change the entire context of what's going on. So it's important. When we talked about, and this is only a brief intro, I know, but when we talked about the emotional intelligence, drawing those quadrants, the one here in the corner was self-manage. Is like, can I manage my tone of voice? And there's really good advice I got from this friend of mine. He's retired now, but he worked security at a high school. One of the points of training he got when confronting situations in the high school setting was if a student, or presumably it would always be a student, not necessarily a teacher, okay? So presume it's a student. Students there with a loud voice, talk kind of like this and say, so are you bothered by that? You just give a really soft voice that you can barely hear. The other person will, in order to listen, will tone down their intensity, shall we say, so that it's like, oh, okay. It just de-escalates the situation. Right, so tone of voice, body language. Body language is interesting because it's not the same from one country to another country. Now, if we fold our arms like this in the United States, what does that mean? We're talking with somebody. So if we're talking, what is this saying to you?
Well, so sometimes it can be you made up your mind and I got to convince you about something, or it can be you have my undivided attention and you're seriously listening to what I have to say.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So you probably pick that out by tone of voice.
Yeah.
Or maybe facial expression as well.
Yeah.
So usually it means the first that you mentioned is like, I really don't agree with you, and you're wasting my time. Will you go away?
I was gonna say defense.
Yeah, it's a very defensive type posture usually. Now in India, this body language is showing a lot of respect to you. It's totally the opposite. So just starting to understand cultural nuances is really critical when working with people. So the body language matters, and this isn't saying anything we haven't seen before, but the key thing with this listening actively is the emphasis is on the listening. In other words, I don't put my questions on the table or my statements on the table until the other person's done. I don't care if it takes 15 minutes or a half hour or an hour. I don't put my stuff on the table until that person's got his or her stuff on the table. I know what he or she's thinking.
Isn't there generally, when you do that, I think it's about a 10-second rule, which seems pretty long when a person finishes speaking, because sometimes they may not be done.
Right. So I haven't heard that guideline. What I've usually heard is in order to listen actively, you can put down questions such, and this really gets to our understanding, right? So how do we do understanding? So let me tag that just for a second. That was the 10-second rule, right? That's what you're talking about? Yeah, you wait 10 seconds.
Right.
Okay. And then it was idea after 10 seconds, what would you put on the table? Then that means they're done, or is that just?
You're taking it that they are done and that you are digesting what was spoken to you or said to you, and then you begin.
Okay, got it. All right, so that's perfect for going into the understanding part here. The understanding part, and a term that's been around in various circles, is reflective listening. So I've always used this term. So reflective listening is such that, okay, so let's say the 10 seconds happen. So it's like, okay, so I think the person's done now. It's like, so I'm wondering what the next step would be. Or I'm wondering if I understood you correctly about the situation that made you angry, or the situation that made you happy, or whatever. Yeah, but this idea of reflective listening, starting off with I'm wondering, and then just fill in the blank question. This basically says, I really want to understand what you're saying. So it doesn't, it's different from saying, oh, so you told me this. Now, that's a statement that, if you're getting some people based on their personalities, they'll just say, close enough, okay, yeah. So, and the point in there is, I'm wondering if you mean this. Always ending with a question mark, even if it's a statement. That's one piece of advice that I heard. It's like, oh, okay, that's really effective.
And one of the things I used to do is always say, based on my understanding, this is what I got out of that, so that way they can correct me.
Exactly. So that's the whole point here. So and that's another way of saying it, based on what I understand. And then you're asking a question. Okay, so you're basically saying, I give you permission to correct me. All right. So you think through this portion here, just in family life, with friends, in the work setting, this is all stuff that's common whenever people interact. This is the bedrock of how to be able to keep dialogue and conversation going. All right, retaining. You got to write it down, write it down. The idea is remember what's said. Our memories are pretty good if it's an intense moment, and our memories are a little less good if it's just more of a semi-casual moment. It's like, what did you say yesterday? Okay. All right, the idea of action is in a business setting. There's always the next step to be taken. Okay. All right, so this Lura, is something that works really well. I've been watching really, really carefully, probably since the mid 80s. It's like, okay, how do people interact? How do they interact, talk with each other? I've got three daughters. The youngest is, I might get my math wrong, but the youngest is 24 right now. Yeah, 24, 27, and 30. So they're all married, but even in their high school years, it's like, of course, teenagers like to talk when it's like 9:30 at night. It's like, okay, I'm kind of thinking it'd be nice to go to bed, but you just park that idea and forget about it 3 or 4 times a week. So, and just listen, interact with them. There's another principle I use with the kids a lot, and I tend to do on the job a lot as well, is I avoid saying no, find ways to say yes. It's like with a condition attached. It's like, yes, we could do that, we can do that, but only if we have this additional support. Or yes, we can do that if we change this one priority. So we can, or yes, find a way to say yes, but attach a condition to it instead of being the person that's known for saying no. It just invites discussion and invites participation and keeps the emotions out of the picture if it's a tough situation. So basically find a way to say yes with a condition. And that was actually the key to, I used that at work a lot, but it was also the key to keeping really good relationship with my daughters through all of their teen years, except for the two years where my oldest daughter kind of checked out from the family. So that was a tough 2 years. Unfortunately, that was the first 2 years of high school, not the last two.
I have a question. I've in my work experience, I've dealt with some people that are trying to explain some requirements like business analysts, and some of them are functional users. And they're saying something, and then they keep saying, "Does this make sense?" Or is what I'm saying crazy? And it's like, I always felt weird about that when they're constantly saying, "Does this make sense?" And actually, one of them was a friend, and so she would do that, and I would just ignore it. And then at the end, I would tell her everything she's asking me to do. She was a business analyst, I was the developer. But I always felt from the business side, if they're saying, does this make sense? It makes me feel like they're putting me on the spot, that they don't believe I follow what they're telling me instead of giving me time. So I don't know is that a good thing to do as a business analyst?
Does this make sense?
Yeah.
I don't think I've, this is a strong statement, I don't think I've ever used that.
I don't either.
Because it doesn't connect well with people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think though, what I'm having to do a quick check in my memory here. What do I use instead? Instead of saying, "Does this make sense?"
Do you agree?
I usually don't even go that way. I ask, are there any? I really focus heavily on. So what are our options? Instead of saying, "Does this make sense?" or "Do you agree?" I just go to, what are the options? Then we do a pros cons on each of the options. So it's a typical brainstorming experience. You sit down with a group of people, do some brainstorming. You get everybody's ideas on the table, or on the whiteboard, so to speak, and then do a pro con on each of those. So it becomes an objective. And what's the criteria for saying, yes, we should do that, or what's the criteria that's going to flip it to the no, we shouldn't do that. So that I really try to leave it a lot in the hands of the individuals. Now here's a key part though, and if for all of the solution architect type work I've done, as well as the requirements type work I've done, I've already pre-thought what the end goal is going to be. I'm not walking into that conversation really looking for answers. I'm looking for building consensus and filling in tons of detail. I already know what the answer is going to be 6 months down the road, or a year down the road, or a year and a half down the road. But that was part of my job, even from the mid-90s all the way through 2014. So it's just knowing where do you have to land in order to be successful. Where does the project more specifically need to land in order for the team to be successful?
The reason why I use "Do you agree?" is because I'm working with the stakeholders. And if I can get a lot of agreements, at the end, you can sign off on this.
Yes. Oh, and that's a perfect time to use it. Do you agree? When you need to hit that point of sign off, that question has to be on the table. Do you agree with this and this? That's the whole point of doing a requirements review. in various settings, after the requirements have been elicited and they've been formally documented and being analyzed and documented appropriately, modified appropriately, there's that point of no return where this is what we're saying, right?
Right, to avoid change management.
Exactly. So there's that formal point of review where it's the I agree, or it's like, I agree only if this other condition is put in here, this other clarification is put in there. So there's always a document review.
So then when you say
Now,
8% of
now,
the
it could be
words-
document review or it could be more informal. It just depends on the nature of how critical the item is. It could be an informal discussion, or it might be a more formal document. Obviously there's contracts involved. The other party is on the other side of the contract from where you are. It'll be a formal document. It'll be a formal, I agree.
So when you say 8% of the words matter versus 80% of the body language based on, I guess, some research or something.
Yeah.
I think words play a much bigger part when you're dealing with people, as well as that tone and also the body language. My challenge was the tone because of the depths of my voice, that I had to try to keep it low if I get excited.
Some people don't know what to do with energy. Huh?
Right. So I had to learn how to tame the tone of my voice. But just like as Lamont was saying, those same words, they would not be as big to me as an issue as someone saying, like I said. That those words will kind of be a turnoff for me, because it's saying, I didn't understand, but I did understand,
Yep.
but I'm asking you this to make sure that this is what we want to do. So like I said, kind of sets me back a little bit, but I learned how to work with that.
That's good. That's that self-management aspect. And other people that are not talkative or energetic, they have to do the self-management of, okay, I should speak up now. Okay, it flips the other direction too. Let's see, there's one other I wanted to add to this. That's good enough. All right, so the point in here about listening is it's really critical. It's very worthwhile to pick up some material on good listening. You could look up reflective listening. That's one keyword that should be around to help focus on this. So let me just go back to sharing the slide here. Okay, so skilled listener portion, super critical. Going into motivational speaker, I was like, wait a minute. There's very few people that are motivational speakers. I certainly don't consider myself to be one. So what's interesting about that, though, and this goes from a conversation that I had about 2 years ago with a guy that teaches leadership at the Air Force Academy. So he'd been teaching for 10 years. Before that, for about 10 years, he was a commander of special ops forces in South America, Central America. So this idea of, what is a team? And how do you get team members to trust each other? It's life and death situations that they go into. Okay, so this whole idea of team leader and motivational speaker kind of blends together. But in the team context, as well as just personal interaction with individuals, there's a particular phrase that I've always adhered to. I think with very few exceptions ever violated in the last 30 years or so. That's just honor the other person. Find some way to ascribe value, to affirm that person's value, even if there's lots of reasons to say you're a jerk. You find something that is going to honor that person, preferably doing it in public, verbal statement in some way. All right, so that concept of honoring people, that's a way of motivating a team. If there's individuals that are being honored in some manner, where they really see that they value, their worth is something of significance here in terms of what they're contributing and all, and who they are as individuals, they're with you. You can ask them to basically almost go on a road through hell, so to speak, in terms of software releases and issues and problems, and they'll go with you.
In my past, if I worked on tickets or a project, I always sent out an email giving kudos to the DBAs, because I know I kind of live and die on the DBA that's helping me. So when I've done that a few times, it's like the DBAs in the future, like I send them a message instead of my waiting a week or 2 weeks for a response. They get back to me within a couple of hours. So it's like just pat them on the back whenever you can.
Yep, compliments are, everybody needs compliments. Yeah. And, that's a way of encouraging people. I don't know, that I've heard that phrase where it takes like one good thing, it takes 9 good things to overturn one bad thing. For whatever reason, the way our thinking's wired, it's towards the pessimistic, negative side. It takes some discipline to not operate in that capacity. Okay, so motivational speaker, not really needed. Just got to know how to connect with people. Honoring them is a lot better way that leads into the idea of building a team. So the team also means, and this is part of what's in the emotional intelligence, it means being vulnerable. It's like, how are you doing today? And what's our normal answer in U.S. society? Good. Doesn't matter how you're doing. And truthfully, they don't care either. You're just going through this ritual. So, yeah, and I purposely, for more than a few years now, I'll play with people on that. It's like, how are you doing? I've been better. That's good. What? They expect an answer that's conventional, and give them something that's honest. Doesn't need to necessarily be personal, but give them something reasonably honest so they know where you're at today.
That is an open-ended question.
It is. Very open-ended. Okay, so visionary, that's part of the aspect where I mentioned. You got to be able to see where the project is going to land, what's going to make this thing successful, that people can wrap themselves around and say, we did this is good. So I tend to always prefer to be in the background and find people that can be in the foreground. So that's a good thing to do. Troubleshooter. All right, so troubleshooting and even getting, like the DBA interactions, troubleshooting anything with a technical expert especially, it's like, listen to what they're saying or go read something out of a book or on the internet, get informed enough to be able to ask a question that uses the terminology that he or she uses for their job, for the profession. It's like, okay, so what is this, so are we talking about 3 or 4 stored procedures that need to be changed or what? As a business analyst, to be able to have some recognition of, oh, this is what a stored procedure is. It's software that operates inside the database kernel. So it's very fast in its execution as opposed to a piece of software that's on an application server. And we'll look at application server, database server architecture later on, the 3-tier concept when we get to it. But just to be able to research a little bit, read a little bit, and then ask a question that's meaningful. Don't just walk in there and say, what does this mean? That's like almost one of the worst questions you could ask somebody. Because it says, number 1, I haven't thought about it much myself. I want you to babysit me through this. And the second thing is that it doesn't show that you're really wanting to contribute to the team. Just even if it's just a few words, it matters. It's also helpful, obviously, to know what people are from. I've been in India 4 times. What makes a big difference for the Indian colleagues that I work with is like, I can mention that I've been to Jamnagar or Hyderabad, and their eyes will pop open like, really? Then I ask, so what city are you from? And I've done it the other way around where I just ask, so what city are you from? It's, oh, it's from India. But give me a name. And then like, you actually know where that is? All right, so here's the hows aspect of this. So we looked at the whats. There's a huge amount of soft skills on this side. This side's all about soft skills. This one's really about what are you doing? These are different activities that you do as a business analyst. When we get into the how does not require having a degree. Don't have to be able to write code. You have to know about the process for producing code, obviously. Going from requirements to design to unit test to integration test and deployment. Professional development training and business analysis techniques is very helpful. So I never actually had the training per se, I just learned it on the job. But because I shift projects often enough, I get a variety of training. So it's all on the job. It's the way that I've usually done it. All right, criteria for success, gotta know the domain. So you're gonna go into, and this is the way I usually found for myself when I was job hunting. I thought, let me just try to do some job hunting for a while here. I was only half serious about doing it, I guess, but I put my heart into it. So for a month, I would look at medical device companies, Abbott and Baxter. What's that one that spun off of Abbott? AbbVie. Okay. So for a month, I would go into learning everything about medical device companies. And I'd put in applications to those companies. In another month, I'd go, oh, let me look in the finance industry. So learn about finance. Just focus on that for a month. So this whole idea of obtaining domain experience, you can obtain domain knowledge really fast and easy. It takes a good solid 40 hours, I think, to get a good understanding of an industry. But if you come into an interview talking about the industry, not just about yourself, but talking about their perspective of their position and their industry, you're looking to fill their need. You're not there looking for a job for me. I'm not there looking for a job for me. I'm looking there to fill a need for their business and their industry. Those are two different perspectives that are polar opposites to each other. All right, so BA-BOK is helpful, obviously. All right, so here's some common tasks and activities. There's a couple of slides that follow on with this. All right, so this is a little bit about the how. So there's project planning involved, facilitation and moderation. See a little bit more on that. Elicitation has a good diagram in here to take a look at, and there's a few others listed. Project planning, why is project planning in there? We don't have a slide on it, but later on we loop back to how does the BA relate to the project manager? So what is the business analyst involvement with project planning?
From my understanding, EBA should be involved almost from the initiation portion of it, not just come in when things are moving on, all through the close. So the BA should be involved at every aspect of the project planning, and that's to my understanding, and that's how it was when I was involved with projects too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, always true. So the project manager kind of knows what to do. They can follow the schedule template that they used on the last project. The details of the uniqueness of this project is something the business analyst is the one that's privy to and understands and can communicate to that individual with that individual. So getting the skill sets for the people lined up correctly and just understanding the scope of work, that's something I was always working with on our project managers, because our projects at Motorola always tended to be lesser skilled than we needed the people to be. So there was always it's like, Robert, you're gonna need to give a little bit more time in the schedule, or this one, actually that can only take a few days. So just being able to review and understand the schedule. The key part, you don't own the schedule, but you have a significant role in creating and modifying that schedule. I'm not talking for the entry level, of course, but for that more junior to senior level position. All right, facilitation and moderation. We've got, we've got people coming together, right? So the point here is consensus decision making. So what is consensus though?
Agreeing.
That's our common quick answer, but from an ACP Agile perspective, consensus is actually majority. We are going to find some people that will say consensus is majority. Is unanimous. They say consensus has to be unanimous, but it's actually more common that consensus is majority. And the idea of it actually working is that those that are in the minority view on what alternative to go with or whatever, those in the minority view understand if the majority say goes this way, we'll support going that way. Because next time the other decision comes around, I might be in the minority view that time. So it varies over time. But the idea is that consensus can be majority. It doesn't have to be unanimous. So that works well when you're working with the technical staff. When you're working with customers, like, I want this. Then it's a lot trickier. But we'll look at some workshop techniques. One of them is called JAD, with more with developers, but interviewing and working with stakeholders, especially when they're together in user groups, is a really valuable tool to bring about the agreeable consensus. Okay, this requirements elicitation. So there's two words out there. In the business community, it's elicitation. In the product-oriented companies, it's requirements gathering. So it's requirements elicitation, or it's requirements gathering. So those two terms are interchangeable. And at Motorola, we never use the word elicitation. We're providing products and systems. We're gathering requirements. I go talk to somebody who's worked in the data processing center for Walgreens, and there's some business analysis people there that I've had in my classes, and the only word they've ever heard is elicitation. Like, we always elicit requirements. And so those words trade off with each other. You just got to know the culture of the company, and it tends to be culture is defined by, are they providing a product, or are they actually focusing on their business processes? All right, this slide 30 is a nice one to walk through. All right, so what does elicitation look like? And the key label to put on here, elicitation is all about the other people. Not about me as the business analyst, it's all about the other people. So if you walk through from that perspective, the business analyst is going to walk in here and have no knowledge, has to be able to understand a business case and objective, because that's a starting point for every project. So the business analyst, if you get a job as business analyst, or when you get a job as a business analyst, that's what you're going to do. Come into a project. Can you just give me some background on what the business case was for this particular project? Just establish a framework of understanding. Because if you work on requirements one after the other, without knowing business case, it's like, I kind of get the idea. Maybe the business case is expressed in a PowerPoint somewhere. It's related to the business case, but there has to be some framework. All right, so understand business case and objectives. Elicitation plan. What is a plan?
How to go about actually getting that information.
All right, so there's a how to get it, I think you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's so that works. You need to fill in some more detail. The answer works. You need to fill in some more detail though.
We're going to get the information from.
Okay, so the how means there's a where. The how could mean, are we going to do some survey with customers? Are we going to bring like send out survey, they give us feedback, we're gonna bring them together. So the how is a critical part of that. What do we have money for? Okay, and then you're bringing in, so that's the how question, you're bringing in the,
Where,
okay, where are we gonna be meeting?
Yeah.
If it's, if the United States is our market, where matters, it's like East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. Just gonna do it over WebEx. All right, so the other key thing with the plan is it's got dates. Not a plan until it has dates. I get a lot of emails and I was at Monroe, it's like, would you do this? Or we'll do this. It's like commitments or asking for a commitment. And I just look at that and I say, and I don't see a date on there, so low priority, okay.
yeah.
I'll probably never look at it again. All right, so the plan always involves dates. That's the when component of the question. So we're going to do this by this point.
And maybe severities,
Severities in terms of
level of the importance. Severity 1, 2, 3,
Mhm.
or ABC, however the company wants to write their severities.
so that's the that focuses on what in terms of what we're going to deal with. And severity is a nice simple way of ranking
Right.
what's relevant to take a look at. Okay, so the key thing with the plan is you got to have dates. And invite people into that, determine how you're going to do that invitation. When I say invite people into that being a meeting or that being a survey or whatever the context might be for the how. Right. Agenda, always got to have an agenda. It always takes me too long to write an agenda, so I try to figure out how to not write the agenda or to say it in one sentence. Because if I start thinking, maybe it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I usually don't give people the full agenda. As I start writing the agenda, I think about this, that, and the other thing, about how all of these things relate to each other, and pretty much have most of the answer by the time I send out the agenda. And the answer, put that in quotes, means I know what I don't know. Okay. And I know the facts. So I use this phrase when I'm mentoring people, you gotta know what you don't know. So it's, and my example of this is that, the last product I worked with, senior architect, very good telecom systems development guy. So he's jumping into this, let's do a Oracle-based enterprise data warehouse style, very data-centric application from the ground floor up. And it's like, I got out of the project 6 to 8 months after they started it, and it was just ramping up then, the early stages. And I was kind of looking at it like, you're doing what in the labs? You gotta be kidding me. It's like, well, we can just do a little sample of what in our labs of what the physical product is going to be and all of its hard disks and CPU and all this other stuff. We'll just do a little sample in the lab, because that always works when we design a radio system. We just do a sample in the lab. So we don't go out and put like 300 base stations from the bottom of the cell towers in our lab. We just do something really small. It's like, that doesn't work. So we went through major headache upgrading the lab twice. They started with the wrong perspective. That was an example of like, well, I know what I know, which is you can scale up from a lab, control lab situation into a major system. But for some work, such as with databases, especially when you're doing it from the ground, going up by a factor of 10 in terms of load on that machine, there's no way you're going to do that successfully. You got to have the actual machine there with the actual drives and all of the real stuff. Okay. So this idea of know what you don't know, this individual needed to know, okay, database performance is a very sensitive issue. And I've never done software development in that space, so I better talk with somebody else that has done. All right, so you got to know what you don't know. So you've been able to go through this in the context of visually scanning that. So we don't need to spend more time on this, except to the point of saying, when you facilitate the elicitation, you're collecting comments, Got to convert the comments, which are essentially notes, into models and requirements. So what was the word that I said was models?
Diagram.
Yep, diagrams. Yep. So let that stay in your mind. So other tasks here: project documentation, change management, quality assurance, and user training. Why user training?
Well, when you have anything new that's coming into the business, the user needs to know how to work on it or how to make it do the expectations that are given.
Right. So that's the reason why I put that 3-system model up. So just from a review perspective, so what are the 3 systems? Organization, meaning the people, because that's where the training has to happen.
Business process.
Yep, business processes. Process meaning workflow. Over here we've got user tasks. And the third one,
IT.
right, it's IT, software, hardware. Right. In the training, this is how are the changes in that future state going to affect the user tasks in the organization. So, there's some people whose job we might be eliminating by a particular project. That's just the raw reality of the world these days. Okay. But based on that, you got to know how to work with the technical community. All right. All right, so a couple fun slides right here, and then we'll take a break. All right, so life without a business analyst, it's like just pull your hair out type deal, right? Life with a business analyst, this person, in a senior type of role, so for intermediate or senior type role, this person is a balancing. It's like this, it provides balance between subject matter experts, which tend to be either technical oriented or business industry domain oriented, solution architects, the users, and the business executives. This is a more senior type person, the way this is portrayed here. But this idea of providing some balance across these 4 regions is just normal life for a business analyst.
Out of curiosity, who has the higher stress load, the solution architect or the business analyst? In your opinion?
My position is always heavily blended of those two. So I don't really distinguish them that well.
Okay. It's all the same.
Yeah, the organization was heavily structured towards blending those as well. We did have some systems engineers that were almost exclusively oriented towards, and I'll use the elicitation terminology for requirements. And then we had some people that we've never had a pure solution architect person at Motorola, because they always do at least some level of EA style requirements and elicitation. So that it was the solution architects I would say had the higher stress. Because they're working with figuring out what do we do for our next contract. Because the nature of the business and the telecom, when you're putting out a product, especially a large systems type product, the nature of the engagement with your customer is if say Lamont is the potential client or customer. He's going to send out a request for proposal to like this side of the room. And then, if both of your, each of you representing 2 different companies, say 3, I'll be on this side as well. So we're going to write our response. We're going to provide a response to that request for proposal. Say, here's how we'd implement it, how we'd do it. That's talking through the solution architecture perspective. Here's the solution. You got to do it in a pretty finite number of pages. talking about something that might be anywhere from a $10 million contract to a $25 million contract. Or, well, actually, for the contracts we were doing, they're more in the range of 50 million to 200 million. Okay, so you know, Lamont gets the responses back, reviews them, and then says, okay, I'm going to pick this company. Crystal wins, okay? And now Crystal's got to have some solution architects that can look at that that template, so to speak, that Lamont is already expecting. Go back to your technical staff and say, so by the way, how do we do this now? Okay. So that's the nature of the solution architect's job, is like, you got to fulfill something that got committed to, even though you usually didn't participate in the commitment. That's a very difficult road to do. I mentioned I was one of the 3 team leads. Because I came in the project in August, we're supposed to ship all the hardware and the base software in December. In September, early October, I said, by the way, I think you all realize this, but let me just ask you, how is this product supposed to communicate across 2 independent networks, which is what the customer required? They're like, why are you asking that? I mean, they told us in Finland that these products are heterogeneous, in many. I mean, that they can work with multiple contexts. It's like, well, they meant that you can have different vendor products, like from Samsung and from Ericsson and from Motorola, all in that same system. But when you talk about computer network design, the customer is saying they've got 2 separate computer networks, one for data. You cannot tell them that or in any way send a message from one network to the other network, because these 2 networks do not talk to each other at all. Totally independent networks. So we're putting our product into their environment. Our product has to talk to both networks. So let me go back to my question again. How on earth is this supposed to work? Because I'll tell you, it doesn't. After about a week or 10 days, or they're like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't. Can you fix that in the next month or 2? So that was some intense work. But again, it's like the solution architect is going to get caught holding the bag, so to speak, if there's anything missing, especially if the project has been already structured by those that didn't really check what they don't know. Okay.
I have my view of that.
Go ahead, let's hear you.
The solution architect will be the one that will be the go-to person if things don't work out. But I think the higher stress is on the BA. And the reason why I feel that way is because being in that position in one of the projects, it wasn't just I solicited the requirements, but I had to keep doing customer service with all of those different teams and making sure that there was nothing that failed through the cracks. So like what you're saying, you had 2 different systems, and the aspect of when I did it, the different teams going to the cloud versus staying on hardware. Can everybody go to the cloud? If they can't go to the cloud, why not? And what solution do you have to bring to the table with those that can't go on the cloud, for those that are remote or so forth? So I looked at the stresses being that you have to come through, but then me having to make sure that I do all my part to see that you get through.
Right. It is a teamwork thing, completely. And I do know of a person who has been a solution architect in a previous company, usually contract basis. And from her perspective, it's like, that actually wasn't too hard. So she's had experience that matches what you're mentioning as well, where she would probably say the stress is more on the BA. They'll be the senior BA at that point. So those that are entry level is like, and learn from seeing what the more senior people are you experience.
The reason I asked, I have hypertension, so I need to know about it. Well, to elevate the pressure.
No, you do have to find some kind of stress relief in that role as a BA because it is stressful. And there can be times I've been at work till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Fixing a PM problem.
Mhm.
So again, go to the solution architect. The PM going home, but
Right.
I'm fixing the problem for the PM that she caused.
Mhm.
So that she would look bad that next day. So solution architect to me kind of falls in where the PM is at, making sure that this project does succeed.
Mhm.
But then you have your project coordinator, you have your QAs, you have everybody else
Right.
that's standing behind the scene fixing the problem. So the stress is truly behind the scenes to me. Whereas the PM or the solution architect is going to be the person that is going to go before the customer or the final stakeholder or the sponsor
Yep.
and say, here's the final product.
Mhm.
But then your stress as a solution architect will be, I need to make sure that BA is on top of everybody else.
Both, it depends a lot on the business environment. These are good questions to think about how to not state directly in an interview, but to come across getting some sense of what the culture is in the company.
Right, that's why I say culture is important.
It is really critical.
And I also find that this is probably completely unrelated, but I find value when you're interviewing, like walking through the department. I ask them, can you show me the department I'll be working in? If I see people look like they've been pulling their hair out, and if it's like people's workstations are side by side, I'm like, that's not quite what I want. I need some cubicles or something close to the office, and people need to be calm. I don't want to see people like stressed out.
And that is a good
Yeah, that's a good
take a
strategy.
walk through.
I never
Yes.
thought about that.
Tells you about the culture.
Okay, why don't we take a break here? So we'll do an introduction to requirements, and that'll launch us into what we'll be working on for the balance of our time today, and then all of our next class together.
Okay.